Hello and welcome to Pup Pup Productions and Storytime. And today I'd like to read an excerpt from a short story I wrote that was published about a year ago in the September 2009 issue, Aoife's Kiss. And the name of the short story is The Crow King. And the protagonist of the story, Brian, is based on my dad. Although, it's just based on my dad. Okay. He'd always liked crows, the magic of their lonely calls at twilight. There was a crowd of them who hung out on the wires outside his place. Brian watched them, face to face from his bedroom on the second floor. Or would that be face to beak? Face to tail feather? A murder, that's what they were called, a murder of crows gathered outside his bedroom window. Made it sound like they were mafia, but when he thought about it, they were really only petty thieves and crooks engaging in a bit of larceny now and again. He and his cats watched them in the morning, hunched on the lines above San Jose Avenue while he drank his first cuppa, or in the evening when he had his pipe. The crows lurked, waiting for people to toss their fries or burgers into the gutter. They were chatty things. When he talked to them, they talked back, or at least they made noise back, as crows do, responding to him as they chattered with each other. They were company on his doctor-advised walks. Brian had always been a runner, but his heart didn't work the way it did when he was young. Now it was walking for him. He tried taking his cats on walks with him using a leash. They didn't like that. At least, not like the cats in those magazines that his girlfriend brought home occasionally. They were cats. They had other things to do than walk on a leash with a clumsy human. In the end, it was just him and the crows. Daly City had never been a pretty city, not even back in the days when they'd written that song about it. Sitting on hills, mid-peninsula, the fog from the ocean battling it out with the fog from the bay, skulking along the hills and valleys, each front sullenly waiting for the other to leave. He had lived there long enough to have his children grow up somewhere else, come stay with him, fight with him, and leave again. It was the way of the world as far as he could tell. At least, that was the way it had been back in East London, with Brian's own father. He knew people, liked people even, as long as they didn't live with him. People who weren't children or ex-wives or girlfriends making demands on him. Most mornings for his walk, he'd follow the street up to the coffee shop over the hill to have his second cuppa with breakfast. He'd chat with the other European expats sitting in the corner bashing politics or complaining about their own families. On the way to the booth in the back, Brian stopped by the fish tank. The Asian owners had had their shop professionally feng shuied, arranging plants, booze, cash registers, wherever the geomancer had advised. There was a fish tank at one end of the shop. A lot of the fish had long gone. But there was one old carp that just kept on living, wearing the gold and orange scales like an old sovereign wears his robes. Brian wondered how he felt, old and alone in the tank, waiting to die. No other fish to talk to. Brian had the other expats, and his cats, and the crows. He liked talking to the carp. His friends in the back laughed at him. Crazy Brian! Hey, Bri! Don't talk back! Their German, French, Russian accents, rough from years of tobacco, alcohol, and coffee, arced across the restaurant as they shook their heads. Get married! Like that would keep him sane. He'd been married 4 times. The carp's better company, Brian clipped back. Maybe the old carp heard him. Maybe not. Brian never tapped on the glass. He and his cats watched the Discovery Channel. Fish were pretty sensitive. A light tap on the glass would hurt them. But he waved and talked, paid his respects. It was only polite. Jushi, behind the counter, just nodded and smiled as if he too had his own conversations with the carp. After brekkie, Brian continued his walk, following his route back down the hill, sometimes staying on San Jose Avenue, sometimes following Mission, sometimes even went to the BART station to people watch, count the cars and the train. He passed all sorts on his walks. Housewives, businessmen, cats, dogs, straight kids, and of course crows. The crows especially, acting as if passing the time of day was expected of civilized folk, which it was, in places that were still civilized. The crows stopped when he stopped. Sometimes it was only a nod and a look before they flapped off, but the acknowledgement was there. Brian had seen a couple of crows working together once while on one of his walks. Eyeing a wrap that held part of a burger thrown from a car window to rest in the middle of John Daly Boulevard, the crows croaked and chatted, planning as if on a mission. The boulevard was unexpectedly still in the gray morning air, lights at both ends of the street red. The crows looked each way, and hopping off the sidewalk, half waddled, half flew to the prize in the middle of the road. Brian tensed, ready to walk out in the street and pretend he was crossing if necessary. Each crow grasped an end of the wrap in his beak, flapping and waddling back to the sidewalk. Brian released the breath he'd been holding once the crows made it back. They'd been barely missed by cars let loose by the green light at the top of the hill. Good job, that. I wasn't sure you were going to make it, Brian congratulated them. He felt kind of silly doing that until one cocked his eye up at Brian, seeming to wink at him, replying in a broken "Crap!" Something bright flashed on his head, despite the overcast skies, and then was gone. A trick of the light? Well, enjoy your brekkie, Brian waved and moved off. He wanted to finish his walk. Go home and read through his medical paperwork. His doctor was making noises about a pacemaker. He wasn't sure about that. Why stretch things out and live beyond your usefulness? Of course, who could take care of his cats then? The crows? Brian laughed. Those crows were clever. Brian liked clever. He'd noticed the murder crows that haunted his neighborhood liked to sit on the wires up over the alley as well. One day, on impulse, he went to the corner store on the way back from one of his walks. And back, he saw the line of warm, plain, soggy burgers under the heating lamp. Gingerly, he used a paper napkin to pick one from the array. Not very civilized food, is it? Brian joked wryly at the pimpled face behind the counter. $2.16, please. The young man's face stared blankly past Brian's ear, teeth massaging a large wad of gum. Sighing, Brian paid, already outlining inwardly the speech he'd be ready to give the next morning at the coffee shop on the lack of civilized interaction between humans these days. Not like the old days when he'd have been tweaked on the ear by old Jim Bell for such behavior. Brian lost time on his walk as his mind wandered a remembered landscape of green fields, punctuated by blackout curtains and war rations, and the old baker he'd lived with and worked for back when he'd shipped out to the English countryside. World War II, a real war, not some trumped-up excuse to go bully another country. Another life, another time, he spoke to the air. It was the only thing that seemed to listen these days. Brian opened up the sad beef sandwich, placing it on the dumpster lid in the alley. He watched from his place as a large crow investigated the loose paper. Food nested in the middle, eyeing it with suspicion. A sunbreak appeared in the eternal overcast haze, reaching down a golden ray of sun, consecrating the crow's brow. Trick of light or not, Brian was sure this time there was something golden on its head. As if on cue, a handful of crows flapped down, methodically bowing to the larger crow before taking the burger apart, selecting parts and flying away with them. And that's all we have time for today. So, anyway, if you decide to get the rest of the story, pick up a copy of the September 2009 issue of Aoife's Kiss, and that's at Genre Mall. GenreMall.com. That is GenreMall.com. Thank you and have a great day.